Doesn't it worry you?
What? To see a man lose everything like that.
Didn't you want to talk about something?
Well, not really. Just one of those days.
We all have plenty of them. But then when the phone rings...
Hello? It's for me.
When Mr. Bean first appeared on television, he won the Golden Rose of Montreux Award. Since then, he's continued to go from strength to strength. His last outing attracted an audience of almost 19 million people, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. Now Thames Television's Mr. Bean rides again. Whether enjoying the in-flight entertainment or simply giving a helping hand, it's bound to end in disaster. So don't miss his next hilarious collection of capers, next Monday at 8 on Thames.
While London works, so do the Thames News team. And because the news never waits, they're always ready to cover the stories that matter in the Thames region. Join Liz Pike and Andrew Gardner live in the studio for Thames News every Monday to Thursday at 6:30.
It's always nice to have someone you can trust to turn to. That's why Ford are working together with their dealers on new programs of training, service and care to keep you on the road. Ford, it may be your car, but it's still our baby.
We'd thought about it before, just soon after we got married. Decided we couldn't quite afford it at the time. I've definitely always wanted to go private.
It was mainly the idea that you've got a lot of security.
We went for that because it was so much cheaper.
It's not a lot of cost for the cover
and
that you get.
And it's peace of mind as well.
The new BUPA scheme, Health Choice, from £9 a month. Ring us now on 0800 600 555.
Shaving's a pain, scraping and stripping the skin's moisture, which can leave it dry and sore. But now there's Old Spice Sensitive. A new gel protects against scraping, and a remarkable aftershave skin conditioner soothes by replacing lost moisture, making it look and feel great. So what's it to be? Sensitive or new Old Spice Sensitive? It takes the heat out of shaving.
Colin has no common sense. So when he tried to reduce his cholesterol, things didn't go well. Silly, really. Had he any common sense, he'd try things like a low-fat diet with perhaps some oat bran. They could help reduce his cholesterol. Try some common sense. Oat bran flakes from Kellogg's.
Domestos Multi-Surface Cleaner leaves your home not just clean, but hygienically clean. Domestos Multi-Surface Cleaner.
Us germs aren't safe anywhere now.
We put a lot into our new Dolmio frozen meals. Freshly made egg pasta, succulent meat, chunky vegetables, cheddar and parmesan, and Dolmio sauce with 2 types of tomatoes and a unique blend of herbs and spices. There's delicious lasagna, irresistible cannelloni, and tempting ravioli. New Dolmio frozen meals. Put the Dolmio smile on your face.
Headroom's important. Tall, yet easy to drive.
A big, roomy, boxy van.
Bananas. I must have hanging space for my bananas.
I'm in ladies' underwear. Not heavy, but I need to move a lot quickly.
It should be long and about this wide, see?
Quite large. Vast landscapes sometimes.
Well, it's got to be able to carry the lot, you know.
Introducing the brand new Ford Courier.
Look, you... no. No! No! Don't, no.
A familiar face returns to Thames. So for the very best of the one and only Benny Hill, tune in tonight at 10:15.
In 10 minutes, the national and international news from ITN. The time now is 10 o'clock.
There now follows a party political broadcast by the Liberal Democrats.
There are certain times in the history of all countries when the demand for change becomes impossible to ignore. Such a time is now. And the demand, as it always must, is coming from the people.
I think there's time for a change, I would definitely say so.
It's time for a change.
There is a need for a change, complete change.
I think there really does need to be a change before things go drastically wrong.
Labour and Conservative, I think, have kind of torn each other to shreds so many times that maybe a fresh face might do the country a power of good.
A different viewpoint.
The country needs new change, new blood.
More people are going away from the typical Labour Party and Conservative Party.
We need a change.
We need a new change, actually.
There really does need to be a change. That's what more and more of you are saying. And what's more, it seems the kind of change you're asking for is different. You'd think, wouldn't you, that after one of the old parties had been in power for 13 years or so, and really hadn't done very much for the people who put them there, that there'd be a huge and natural demand for a change to the other one. But no, it seems not this time. You're not just saying, okay, out with the blues, in with the reds, it's their turn. You seem to be saying, the change we need this time is a good deal more important than just another change of leader, just another predictable swap between the two old parties. Because this country has noticed, after 40 years of reds out, blues in, blues out, reds in, that they've both failed. 40 years of hope and promise and hard work from all of us. And all they've got to show for it is their 40 years of failed leadership. So you're right. The time's overdue not just for another change of government, but for a fundamental change to our system of government.
I'd like to see the Tories and the Labour depart and someone completely new and an all-new system. Be really good. I think the time has come.
I personally agree wholeheartedly with proportional representation. I think that's absolutely the way forward.
Unfortunately, none of us are able to express our views with the force that we would like because of the current system.
And I think we should have a system whereby there are more women in parliaments, there are more people from ethnic minorities, and more people who actually represent, you know, the ordinary day person in the street.
Not just racial, I think people from up north need to be more represented as well.
I'm very keen on proportional representation. I think that's we're the only country in Europe, I think, that doesn't have it, and I'd like that to be introduced.
The Liberal Democrats are the only party you can vote for in this coming general election that is totally committed to modernizing the way this country is run, starting with fair votes. The Conservative Party won't tell you this, and neither will the Labour Party. But for as long as you've been voting, you've been cheated. Cheated of the right that is yours to elect the leaders you want. Look at this. At the last election, 43 out of every 100 people who voted wanted a Conservative government, and 57 out of every 100 didn't. In a modern and efficient democracy, that would have meant that the Conservative Party was properly entitled to 280 of the 650 seats in the House of Commons. Instead, they got 95 seats more than that, giving them an overall majority of over 100 seats. And it is that overall majority, which in no way reflects the votes and wishes of the people, that has allowed this present government to perpetrate so many bitterly expensive mistakes, like the poll tax. It's this sort of change, a fundamental change for the better in the way this country is governed, that only the Liberal Democrats are pledged to give you. And what's more, we've already started. This is Mingus Campbell, Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament for North East Fife. In this current Parliament, he's introducing a private member's bill to bring democracy back to Scotland.
My bill would be the vanguard of a great constitutional change for the United Kingdom. It would provide Scotland with its own parliament, elected by proportional representation, with fixed four-year terms, with a Bill of Rights, and with all the means necessary for Scotland to manage its own domestic affairs. Our bill is the first step towards changing Britain for good in constitutional terms. The Home Rule Scotland Bill is the means by which we will begin to establish the kind of modern democracy which Britain undoubtedly requires. There's a distinct feeling in Scotland that there is a need for change.
Decentralisation is certainly important up here.
I think it's quite a big issue.
London's probably had a kind of detrimental effect on Scotland for a number of years.
People in Scotland feel aggrieved.
Well, I think devolution is an important policy for Scotland.
I think there's got to be some form of government in Scotland.
So there's one Liberal Democrat MP, already doing what we believe all MPs should be doing, listening to the people and getting things done. And here's another. Archie Kirkwood's the Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament for Roxburgh. He's already got 2 private members' bills through the House of Commons. And now he's introducing another, a full Freedom of Information bill.
At the moment, you have to establish a right to get access to information, and you have to make a case for it. This bill puts the thing the other way around. It puts the boot on the other foot. It gives the individual the right to ask, and it puts the bureaucracy on notice. 40 years of failure in this country, and it has been accompanied by 40 years of obsessive secrecy. I think it does actually go to the root of our style and approach to politics. We're actually trying to get alongside people within their own communities and assist them to achieve what they themselves want to achieve.
We're one of the most secretive governments in the Western democracies.
We ought to have a very open form of government, and the decisions made by the people we elect should be public information, public knowledge.
The government's always kept things from people.
We are very secretive.
We want to know the truth.
I think what we need is some sort of act through Parliament, some sort of Bill of Rights, which actually gives freedom of information to the ordinary voter, the people who have put these politicians in Parliament.
So, after 40 painful years of government failure, isn't it about time we tackle the real problem? Isn't it about time we introduce some real reforms to bring us into line with all the other democracies in the world? We need fair votes, proportional representation, so that each of your votes is of equal value. We need freedom of information. We need decentralisation from London. We need a Bill of Rights to protect us all. We need real reform. Reform of a system that's become rotten and corrupt. That's what this coming election should really be about. Not just changing parties, but changing the system. And there's just one party, the Liberal Democrats, that says out loud what millions of people in this country are thinking. Those 2 old parties have had their chance. It's time to change our system. It's time to change Britain for good.
I like what I'm seeing.
This time, the next election will be the first time I've been able to vote.
It will be for the Liberals, I think.
definitely. I think they're excellent.
I probably will vote for Liberal Democrats.
I think there's an awful lot of support.
I will vote Liberal again.
Yeah, they've got a chance, yeah. I've voted for them before.
I think it's growing, to be honest.
Liberal Democrat. I've never voted before. This will be my first time, and I think I'm going to give them a chance.
I think the Liberal Democrats is going to get my vote.
I think they're excellent. Definitely.
I like what I'm seeing.
I think it's growing.
They will get my vote.
I certainly do vote Liberal Democrat.
Well, I'm going to vote for them.
Liberal Democrat. I'm going to give them a chance.
Well, they get my vote.
To do what we all know needs to be done, the Liberal Democrats need your support, and need it now. So please telephone right away 071 222 7999, or write to me, Paddy Ashdown, at 4 Carley Street, London, SW1P 3NB. That's 071 222 7999. Or write to 4 Carley Street, London, SW1P 3NB.
That was a party political broadcast by the Liberal Democrats.
You're watching Thames Television, now at the time at 10:10, today's national and international news from ITN.
Were these men wrongly jailed? Police examine new evidence. More than 2,000 jobs go at British Aerospace. Kinnoch says the recession's gone to the economy's bone marrow. Major says no to Jacques Delors' plan for more EC spending. And Barbara says, vote for my man, he's running again for president. Good evening. News at 10 has learned that the South Wales police are examining new evidence relating to the murder of a prostitute 4 years ago. 3 men have been in jail for 3 years for killing Lynette White on St. Valentine's Day in 1988. She was stabbed to death in her flat in Cardiff. The conviction of the Cardiff Three, as they are known to their supporters, received little publicity at the time. It happened on the day Mrs. Thatcher resigned in November 1990. It was Britain's most expensive murder trial. The men's supporters have always maintained that they are victims of a serious miscarriage of justice.
Bute Town, Cardiff. The setting almost 4 years ago to the day of a brutal and shocking murder. A prostitute, Lynette White, was stabbed 51 times, her left breast and head almost totally severed. The attack took place in this first-floor flat. After the murder, a man was seen near the building with blood on his hands. The police issued this photo fit. After 9 months and no leads, their inquiries changed tack abruptly. 5 men were charged with the murder. All of them, unlike the man in the photo fit, were black. After the longest murder trial in history, 2 of the 5 were acquitted. They emerged from nearly 2 years in jail, proclaiming the innocence of the others still there.
Innocent! Innocent!
The 3 who were convicted, Yusuf Abdullahi, Tony Paris and Stephen Miller, all had criminal records, but all 3 deny their murderers. The main evidence against them came from 2 prostitutes who said they'd been forced to take part in the attack. Before the trial, this letter, written by one of them, came to light. In it, she says she made the story up under pressure from the police. Yusuf Abdullahi has already been granted leave to appeal. At the original trial, he said he was here at Barry Docks, working a night shift on a ship more than 7 miles from the scene of the murder. 8 witnesses confirmed that story. One recalls the night because of the weather. How are you so convinced that it was on that night that you were on the ship and that you saw Abdullahi?
Well, I wasn't sure on my first statements because I wasn't sure which days I worked or which night. I checked with the Met Office, the weather reports, and I checked from the 12th to the 16th of that month. And the only night it rained was that particular evening.
And there are other witnesses now emerging in Bute Town. They were known to the prosecution, but their statements weren't made available to the defence until 2 months after the end of the trial. They too back up Abdullahi's story. At the trial, this man was brought forward by the prosecution to disprove Abdullahi's alibi. He said he'd seen him in the centre of town on the evening of the murder. Now he's told ITN he isn't so sure.
Well, I wasn't really given the opportunity in court to explain that there is a possibility that the date and time could be wrong. It was very, very difficult to tell because we'd all spent such a long period of time on the ship. It could have actually been the day before, it could have been the day after. But I was never given the opportunity to say, well, I'm not quite sure.
Nearly 4 years on, Abdullahi's lawyer remains convinced he's innocent.
I actually wake up at night thinking about the case, and I cannot tell you why he was convicted. I was convinced all along that he would be acquitted of this crime. I never ever thought he would be convicted, but he was. It's a major failing in the judicial system.
The second defendant, Tony Paris, who has also been granted leave to appeal, was convicted largely on the evidence of a prison informer. The same informer had helped to convict this former policeman. His conviction was later overturned by the Court of Appeal. The third defendant, Stephen Miller, had been Lynette White's boyfriend. He confessed to the killing after 19 police interviews. He's now in Wormwood Scrubs prison. He has an IQ of around 75, the equivalent of an 11-year-old child. He's continuing to fight his case, but has been refused leave to appeal and as a result has no legal aid. Lynette White's flat is now inhabited again. After her murder, a handprint was found in the blood that splattered the room. It doesn't match up with any of the defendants, nor does blood found at the scene. They belong to someone who is yet to be identified. 2 months after the three were convicted, another woman was murdered. She'd been stabbed 83 times, and like Lynette White, her throat had been cut. South Wales police say there's no link between the two killings, but the fact that tonight they've confirmed they're now examining fresh evidence in the case is likely to strengthen still further the doubts that exist here in Cardiff and the fears that if the boys are indeed innocent, Lynette White's killer may still be at large.
British Aerospace, the country's biggest exporter, said it was cutting its workforce by 2,350 at its military and civilian aircraft divisions. Hatfield in Hertfordshire will be worst affected. 830 jobs go there. The Labour leader, Mr Kinnock, said the recession had now gone into the very bone marrow of the British economy. The Prime Minister said the conditions for economic recovery are already in place. But a CBI report said all regions of the country are still stuck in recession. Only two, North West England and the West Midlands, expect things to pick up soon. And figures due out tomorrow are expected to show rises in both unemployment and home repossessions.
At the Hatfield plant in Hertfordshire this evening, where the job losses will cut deepest, workers were unsurprised by the news, but said morale had now touched rock bottom.
Just totally depressing. We're all thinking the worst, expecting the worst, basically. So we're just wondering if this is it, really.
British Aerospace managers are more worried about what the shareholders and the city analysts think than what this country needs as an aerospace industry.
Hatfield builds Aerospace's so-called whispering jet, the 146, and parts of the European Airbus. Management said it was a victim of a global slump in the airline business.
The world has got to pick up. We've got to see an end to this worldwide recession, and then we'll be a bit more optimistic about the future. But we're planning on success. But it depends on the marketplace.
Aerospace's military division, which makes Tornadoes, Harriers and Hawks, has been hit even harder because of an international decline in defence spending following the end of the Cold War. Though union leaders say the government should encourage the industry to diversify.
This government has taken a hands-off approach, free market approach, while our competitors in other countries, Germany and Japan in particular, are now preparing for the growth of the civil aircraft industry, and we are squandering our skills.
Within the last week, car makers and a supermarket chain have also announced redundancies. And today there was ambivalent news on the prospects for recovery. The CBI said a survey showed that over the past 4 months, manufacturing firms say demand and output have fallen in all regions. But the prospects for the next 4 months differ, with two regions, the North West and the West Midlands, expecting a slight improvement in both orders and output, while firms elsewhere expect orders to remain flat or decline slightly. Of the redundancies at British Aerospace, almost 1,000 are among professional engineers, And the unions fear that even if there is a recovery, their skills will be lost to British industry forever.
Right at the heart of the Labour economic team's attack on the government is that what's happening at British Aerospace is evidence that this recession is in danger of crippling the British economy. And they say the government's doing nothing to repair the damage.
The recession which the government caused has now gone into the very bone marrow of the British economy. And they've known for a very long time that there was going to be structural change in the British aerospace industry. The government has not made any form of response whatsoever, and at the same time it's produced a recession which has made alternative work for the highly skilled people who are now to be made redundant all the more difficult to get.
While Mr. Major in Southampton today accepts that earlier forecasts of an economic upturn were too optimistic, he's adamant a slow recovery is underway. While British Aerospace was caught by the twin problems of worldwide recession and defence cuts, he says the future's brighter.
We have been saying consistently that we are putting the country in the right conditions to have a sustained period of recovery without inflation. I don't want a sudden boom and bust mentality. I want a position where we will get steady, sustainable growth, an environment in which businessmen can be confident and can invest and will know that that investment will not be eaten away by inflation or by other extraneous economic difficulties.
The Liberal Democrats say job losses at British Aerospace simply reflect
the feeling of drift that you get. I mean, after all, this government has embarked on ad hoc defence cuts without undertaking any prior review of what Britain's defence commitments are.
And tomorrow the government will announce that unemployment has risen for the 22nd month in a row, bringing the total to around 2.6 million. While it's unclear what effect that'll have on Tory support, the figure's bound to be even higher by the time of the general election. Mark Webster, News at 10, Westminster.
The government says it will fight EC budget plans which could double Britain's payments to Brussels over the next 5 years. The EC Commission President, Mr. Jacques Delors, said an extra £14 billion was needed from EC members by 1997. The money is to be spent on poorer EC countries and on agriculture and foreign policy. Labour said it had yet to be convinced that the extra expenditure was justified.
Jacques Delors is no stranger to budgetary battles, but today he seemed optimistic about his 5-year plan being accepted.
I think so, because it's a good budget to fulfill the implication of Maastricht.
Watched by Britain's junior Foreign Minister Tristan Garel-Jones, he spelt out what he saw as the implications. An overall increase in spending by 1/3, with a big shift to the poorer countries of the south. The British government signalled that was too much.
I think that is substantially more than most nation states will be able to bring about increases in their own domestic economy, so I think it's a pretty high bid.
The Germans, who were as much the architects of Maastricht as Mr. Delors, also have reservations about increased spending because of the recession and their subsidies to the east. Some Euro MPs, though, insist the signatories of the treaty must back their words with cash.
If Mr. Major didn't agree, he shouldn't have signed at that moment. He did sign the whole package. It is a conception of the community which is really going towards a true political union. Political union means a minimum of solidarity among people. It's not a question of just having a free market.
The EC Commissioner for the region says some poorer areas of Britain could benefit.
But we're talking about increasing expenditure on research and development, for example, where the UK does rather well out of the community budget at the moment. So you have to take an overall assessment, and the kind of rather glib assessment that it's the rich north subsidising the south, it's not really as simple as that.
At a press conference later, Jacques Delors, quizzed about Britain's rebate on its contributions to EC funds, said that wouldn't be discussed until after the general election. But would he expect any budget negotiations with the British to be easy?
It's never easy with Great Britain.
So the question of the British rebate has now been put on hold until after the general election. But whoever forms the next government could find themselves involved in a new row over what Britain puts in and gets out of the community. Libby Wiener, News at 10, Strasbourg.
John Major and Cabinet colleagues today sent a clear signal back to Jacques Delors. If re-elected, they'll block his spending plans. The mood was summarised by a former party chairman.
No. Very simply.
In particular, the government's determined the rebates on our contributions won by Mrs. Thatcher will stay in place.
They also feel spending on subsidies for farmers under the Common Agricultural Policy should be cut, not increased. And they say the community doesn't need to go above present spending limits to meet Europe's needs.
There's a lot of wastage going on. The Court of Auditors report, which was published a few weeks ago, makes it clear that a lot of the Commission's arrangements for controlling spending, for evaluating what value is got for it, is very unsatisfactory indeed. And so we're going to be saying to Monsieur Delors, until the Commission sorts out its existing spending and makes sure that we're buying good value with the money that's going in, there's no question of us looking at new spending.
Germany, Britain and France are the three biggest contributors to the EC budget. This year, before rebates are calculated, Germany will pay £5.9 billion, the UK £3.5 billion and France £0.6. After rebates are calculated, Germany's net contribution will go up to £6.3 billion. Britain will give £2.1 billion and France £1 billion. And that's why ministers are predicting they'll get the support of Germany and perhaps France as well when these negotiations begin in earnest later this year. And Labour's not impressed by these plans either.
I think we need a lot of convincing that in the present circumstances, when we're looking for resources for health and education, that we would just go along with this proposal.
From the Liberal Democrats, a plea for a more positive attitude.
Instead of being the opt-out power, we should be in the middle of this, trying to shape a European budget which is sensible, prudent, and leads towards European Monetary Union.
These are just the opening shots in what will be a long campaign, for whoever wins the election will be faced with a community budget which, under present proposals, will cost Britain £1 billion extra every year. Peter Allen, News at 10, Westminster.
A bricklayer from Northern Ireland was cleared at the Old Bailey of plotting an IRA murder campaign in mainland Britain. The prosecution had alleged that William McCain conspired with Nessun Quinlivan and Pierce Macaulay, who escaped from Brixton Prison last July and are still at large. McCain still faces two charges of conspiring with Quinlivan and Macaulay to cause explosions and of possessing firearms with intent to endanger life.
After a trial lasting 3 weeks, the jury took 4 hours to reach one unanimous verdict. The foreman stood up and said they found William McCain not guilty of conspiring to murder the Hampshire businessman Sir Charles Tidbury and others. The judge has now sent the jury to a hotel overnight. Tomorrow they'll continue considering 2 more charges, that McCain conspired to cause explosions and that he was in possession of firearms with intent to endanger life. McCain was arrested after arms and explosives were found in the boot of a car near his flat. He has always maintained that the car belonged to 2 others, Nessun Quinlivan and Piers Macaulay, who are on the run after escaping from Brixton Prison. The judge has told the jury they have to decide whether McCain was cruelly deceived by Quinlivan and Macaulay or whether he is lying to the court. They still have to make up their minds. Robin White, News at 10, the Old Bailey.
America stands alone as the undisputed leader of the world. With that claim, President George Bush formally launched his candidacy for re-election. He promised to silence the voices of gloom and to do whatever is necessary to win, a report in Part 2. Plus, where pollution in the Ukraine cuts life expectancy to 44. And angry solicitors lobby Parliament to protest about legal aid changes. That's in a couple of minutes.
I want to be in bed. I want to be expelled.
I want to be in Europe. I want to be home an hour ago.
I want to be a tree. I want to be served.
I want to be a mermaid. I want to be loved.
I want to be in conglomerates.
Whatever you want to be in life, you want to be with Prudential.
Headroom's important. Tall, yet easy to drive.
A big, roomy, boxy van.
Bananas. I must have hanging space for my bananas.
I'm in ladies' underwear. Not heavy, but I need to move a lot quickly.
It should be long and about this wide, you see.
Quite large. Vast landscapes sometimes.
Well, it's got to be able to carry the lot, you know.
Introducing the brand new Ford Courier.
fruit and herb teas. They're so virtuous. There's not a single calorie in them, and not a drop of caffeine. Just all those naughty things like apples, rose hips, cinnamon.
Fruit and herb tea from the London Herb and Spice Company. Pure wickedness.
This is callback in action. It takes all your calls when you're not available.